Hi, I'm Julie Thompson. Welcome to the Duxbury School Committee Candidate Interviews. I want to take a moment to thank the candidates for participating in this interview and collaborating with PAC TV to bring this informational programming to residents and voters this election season. Let me explain the format. We will be conducting a one-on-one interview style Q&A format with each candidate, lasting about 30 minutes. Responses will not be timed, and follow-up questions may be asked during this format. We aim to ask up to 4 or 5 questions, but that will depend on the length of the responses along with any follow-up discussion during this exchange. Candidates will be allowed to address anything not covered or that they'd like to add clarification to at the end of the interview in their closing remarks. Let's get started. Today we are speaking with Katie Cleary, one of the 3 candidates for school committee in the Duxbury town election. Katie, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. We're going to have a bunch of questions. We're going to have 30 minutes, and we're going to start with question number 1. Okay. One of the many responsibilities of a school committee member is to advocate on behalf of students and their schools and to promote the benefits of the school system to the community. What impression do you want to give of the Duxbury school system, and how would your advocacy showcase all that the district has to offer?
So, I think the Duxbury public school system is a strong and healthy district with so many different opportunities for our students. And I think that, my role on school committee would be to sort of showcase some of the areas where we really shine with regards to promoting like inclusion and offering different programs to kids on a wide spectrum of learning abilities. I think that I would want to show the community that we have a strong core of teachers that we work hard to retain, and that at the end of the day, that is kind of our strongest element is our educators. Our district is in an interesting place right now, coming off of 2 years of, real instability for everyone. And so I think that we really want to show the community that we're working hard to bring everyone back and get everyone back on the same page and sort of give kids the confidence again that they can come to school and learn and that teachers can do their job. So I think overall, just with regards to showing the community strengths, we really want to focus on not necessarily scores and tests and data and assessment, but sort of the people we're producing and the people who work within the buildings, that we are and they are just passionate about what they do, and that they, at the end of the day, are all there for the kids.
We had reached out to the community to ask for questions regarding the candidates, and one of the things was the front-facing promotion of the Duxbury schools, like in the newspapers, often sports. An awful lot of time is given to the sports, which is wonderful. You have a wonderful sports department, obviously, and it spans all the grades. But there's more to Duxbury schools than sports. Yep. So how would you circle that square and make sure that all the things and all the programs that the Duxbury public schools offer kind of have a chance to be in the limelight?
I think that we have a town paper that does a good job of that in a lot of ways, because they promote our theater department and our art department and these core areas. We have a lot of kids in our community who do various things that are not athletically driven. So I think that we have administrators who work hard to promote a lot of those activities, particularly at schools like Alden. They are always mentioning the art pieces, and the high school has this amazing drama department that my oldest son can't wait to get to. So I think that as a school committee, obviously we have student reps, and I think it would be great if those student reps could also speak to the various things going on at the schools at each meeting, just to represent the whole community, because I agree with you. I think a lot is focused on athletics, and it's great. Like, everyone has kids who do different things, but I think as a district as a whole, we shine in a lot of other areas. We have a robotics team. We have different programs. We have science fairs that are incredible, and from the youngest grades, they allow kindergartners the opportunity to do projects. So I think that. And like I said, we do have a town newspaper that focuses on that, but I wish as a district as a whole we were known as a place where kids can come and be included for whatever, activity they find interesting and that they shine in.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea of having a student come to your meetings and just give a little presentation on their initiatives or their programs or what they're involved with.
It would be great. And they do. They have student reps now, but I think that that's sort of my hope for school committee is that we make it a bit more of an engaging session where some of the agenda items allow for a bit more community involvement.
Okay, excellent. Okay, question number 2. When it comes to decision making, it can be a process to balance opposing views, and when working towards a solution, it's not always easy. As an advocate for families and educators, how do you manage the decision making process when there is no simple, straightforward path to a resolution?
I think this has been a lot. This has gone on a lot, I should say, just recently. And as contrite and cheesy as it sounds, it's been a lot of us versus them instead of we. So I think that getting opinions and having conversations regarding some of these topics, there's a lot more power and strength in finding out where everyone lies and what everyone's input is, and then sort of kind of working backward to figure out how those various opinions can come closer to the goal we're looking at. With educators and with parents, there's always going to be probably some differences with regards to, frankly, opinions and where you are. But we, again, going back to my first question, we hire educators because they are the experts and they are the ones who know how to educate. And we and parents in general know their children and they know their hopes for them and what they want out of their education, but they certainly aren't always the experts. And I believe their voices absolutely matter, as does the whole community. But I think when it's hard to get to a resolution, we need to take a step back and look at what's best for the educational advancement of the kids. I think at the end of the day, that needs to be where the decision comes, and it needs to be less about opinions and personalities and more about what is the path that's going to help them at the end of the day achieve what they want from an educational perspective.
Outcomes.
Yeah.
Outcomes are the more important. Let me follow up with a question about this. So social media is obviously widespread. And do you see that it affects decision making for boards and committees? And should a school committee member engage in an online discussion or a debate about anything to do with the schools on social media?
No. Full stop. Okay. I don't think if social media is impacting your opinion and your decision making skills, you probably need to reevaluate where you're at and why you're doing this. Again, everyone has an opinion,
right.
And that's what you're entitled to. But when it comes to decisions, as particularly with school committee, it needs to involve the 5 members, the educational community, and of course the outside community, but in a thoughtful and dignified, for lack of a better word, process. And social media is never any of those things typically. I think it's a great sounding board for people to come together and, for parent communities particularly, to have a place where they can get information and where content can be posted about meetings and things going on at the school. But I do not believe that if you are representing a committee, regardless of your personal account, that you should engage in comments.
What if somebody puts something out there that is absolutely incorrect? Like you had a meeting last night and and the committee voted on something, and then someone comments on it the next day and clearly did not get the vote right. So the information now is out there in the ether and it's not right.
Correct. I can see the need to then, say, I encourage you to look back at the meeting. I encourage you to reach out to one of us. Here's the school committee email. I think going to sources is more important. So if it's just a blatant incorrect statement or lie, I can see engaging in that matter, but not with anything other than a factual statement or an encouragement to reach out to a member. I think there's a fine line there, but
go to the source.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Makes sense. Okay. Question number 3. School budgets can make up a significant percentage of the town budget. How do you get the best bang for the dollar when balancing the district's contracts, the curriculum, the student needs, the facility upkeep and obviously technology, while trying to keep the budget within a reasonable range?
You know, the budget is probably the trickiest piece of a lot of this. And I think that engagement from the community is really important. And I don't think, in my own opinion, that we have a lot of that right now to the level that we need. And so I think that taking a budget and actually looking at it from an individual school level is really important. You know, we have 4 schools in our district. People are invested in the different schools depending on where your children lie.
Sure.
And as a community at whole, I understand that, you know, everyone's interested in the budget because it impacts the whole town, obviously. It's where our tax dollars go. But I think that taking a step back and really looking at a budget line by line probably isn't going to happen for a lot of people. So it's better to hopefully try to find a way to hit people where they're invested and help them understand at the lower level, you know, like this is how this impacts the day-to-day operations of the school and your teachers and your kids. I do think it would be worthwhile to you know, do a thoughtful approach to looking at where we're spending and how, like, where our gaps are. This year they did a survey. They sent out to the whole community asking for where people's concerns were, where their interests were, you know, where they saw gaps. And I think that was hugely beneficial because it was really, you were able to see what do students think are important and what do parents think are important. And what do educators, but then also what do people who don't have children in the schools? Where do they feel that the money should be spent? And at the end of the day, it's, you know, a school district is only as strong as its teachers. And so we need to ensure that we're paying them well and keeping them and retaining them. And so I think, you know, it's not always about like the flashy stuff. It's more about the nitty gritty, like investment. And I think that's hard to do always to get everybody's engagement, but we need to work harder to bring people in where it's meaningful to them.
Right. So during the budget process for the school, do you take line by line in your school committee meetings over the course of however long the budget process goes? So anybody who is watching a school committee meetings could actually see every single line item and you talk about it?
They don't in the meetings. You can have that opportunity to look at that outside of it. And they do a wonderful job actually, but they present more sort of high level, like new FTEs that might be coming in that they're advocating for, any sort of...
what's an FTE for anyone?
I'm sorry, a full-time employee, like, you know, if they're hiring a new math teacher at the high school, like, and then sometimes there's different percentages for how full-time they are.
Yep.
And then any sort of, not sort of capital expenses, because that comes from something else, but if there's different initiatives or technology support, things like that, they're really pretty transparent on a lot of that. So it is, but as of right now, it's this long meeting. And like I said, not everybody's invested in the same manner. So I think finding a more thoughtful way to get that investment from the community would be beneficial, just to get people, it's hard to say the majority of our budget goes to the schools. If you're not really telling everyone where that's going and how it's benefiting the kids, and then how they're turning that around to make our entire district healthier and stronger.
Right. So what about the thought that you don't have to pay for everything? What can you get out of people or your society or whatever that you can bring into the schools that isn't going to add to the budget? How often is that thought about in the Duxbury school system?
I think it's thought about a lot. It was in our strategic plan, actually. You know, some of the pillars revolved a lot around expanding learning opportunities for kids, looking at kind of like global and local perspectives and offering them more opportunities to learn differently, because I do think that we need to meet a lot of kids where they're at, and not everyone's on this college path that's their end goal and their dream. So we are so fortunate to live in the community we do, and there's so many resources, and I think that is something that I would really like to approach more heavily, is looking at our community as a whole and where we have opportunities to leverage some of the areas that either people work in or businesses and things like that. They've done a lot recently with like our maritime school and we have Island Creek Oysters and other companies that have really offered their services, so to speak, but to help like bring different opportunities to our kids. But I do think that on that level we in my opinion need to do a better job of leveraging what's out there.
Okay, excellent. And we'll get back to something you said about college in a minute.
Okay.
Question 4. The school district has recently handled some personnel matters in a very public way.
Yep.
In situations like this, how does a school committee member balance the need for transparency and providing information in a timely manner with the need to follow the process and to follow the law?
Absolutely. I actually think that this year has looked a lot different communication-wise from our schools, and I applaud them. I think they've done the best they can to really be more transparent. Parents pushed for that a lot last year, and it's come a long way, and I do think, so from that perspective, it's getting better. I think as a school committee member, as you said, there are laws and there are rules, so it's important to give enough information that the community is made aware that something's going on, but not everything they're not privy to every bit of information, and that's a fine line, and that's hard, and I understand when it involves your children, you want to know everything from A to Z, but unfortunately, that's not always allowed, and people are protected to privacy rights by law, and so I think with regards to transparency, the emails this year and the information has given what they can. They've let us know what's going on. School committee has worked harder to encourage that from the administration, and I think it's gotten so much better. And I think at the end of the day, people just have to understand that if it was about you too, you wouldn't want all that information out there either. So you have to take a step back and understand that they are doing what they need to do by law, and that they will let you know when there's something that they can tell you.
Okay. So how can a school committee take what has happened in the past and make sure that it doesn't happen again? I mean, dealing with it because it's happened is one thing.
Yep.
But how do you then inform your future policies, procedures to make sure that you're not sitting around the table discussing this again in 2 years?
2 years. No, that's great. I think we have so many policies in place, and at the end of the day, we've hired a superintendent who has hired principals, who has hired administrators that they know are capable and able to lead. So I think it's important to look at our policies, understand where they are, and then meet with administrators and such to find out kind of where the gaps are. And if it is a gap in like knowledge or training or education, that's one piece, and that's where you can sort of change the policy and make it more tangible and more, you can bring in support and figure out ways to sort of fill those gaps. But if it's more of a practice issue, it involves like administration, and it involves school committee saying, as a whole, like, we need to examine this practice and we need to figure out how to hire the right people so that this doesn't happen again, or how to bring programs to our kids to make sure that they have a better understanding of why this was wrong and why it can't happen again. And again, that comes down to resources, but I think that we have to find like a balance of understanding where we need to kind of spend money on trainings and where we can sort of do it internally as a district and make sure our policies are sort of zipped up so that they don't allow those things to happen again.
And what about, just as a final thought on this subject, how do you present the information to students, teachers, parents, school committee members, other members of the community, how you can speak up? Where you go to? Who do you say what to?
So are you saying if there's an incident or just in general?
Anything that comes up that needs further scrutiny.
Yeah. No, I think You want to go, with regards to students, I've seen meetings this year where we've talked about going to the person they trust. And I think that's different for all students. So, educators carry a lot of burden because they are responsible for a lot of things these days. And I think so, but for a lot of kids, that's who they trust. So that's who they'd go to. I would encourage parents to reach out to school committee as a whole. I do believe that should be a first stop. If it's a particular issue within a certain school that, they've able to identify exactly what's going on, reach out to administrators. I mean, you talk to your teachers. I just think, I don't know, there's so much power in really communicating and getting involved and engaged, and you can't complain about something unless you're willing to back it up and really make an effort to make a difference. So I think that you have to be willing to have hard conversations too. And I've never reached out and not had someone say, let's talk. So I think that has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle too, where people are afraid to speak. And we've done that, I think, as a society and as a community. We've done that, but we need to bring that back a little bit and really say there needs to be transparency, and there needs to be a willingness that even if your opinions differ, you're willing to chat. But we have a strong administrative team, and we have great educators. So I think the first stop should be there, and that school committees need to be, again, engaged and willing to talk and not
part of that cycle. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a bonus question.
Okay.
What you decide during your time on the school committee will affect the students of tomorrow. How far into the future do you look to see the impact you could make as a school committee member right now?
I think that it's a reasonable statement to say I would look 3 to 5 years, which I think to make any first of all, we're coming off of 2 years of a global pandemic that impacted everyone in any way you look at it. So we had a strategic plan put in place in 2019, and frankly haven't been able to do a lot of it. We've done a lot, but I don't think they've been able to meet everything. And so I think realistically it's going to take another year or two to sort of get footing back and get things, even not back to pre-pandemic levels, but just back to status quo a little bit. So I think if we can look 3 to 5 years out and say, where do we want to be then? That's probably most realistic. I mean, I think it's important to also think about where we want to be next month and at the end of the school year, and from so many different perspectives.
Yeah. What about this? Okay, over the past decade or so, the focus on post-secondary education would always be which college you're going to go to. You're going to go to college. Now, people are looking at the trades. They're looking at certificate programs. The whole idea that you go to school, you go to 12th grade, then you should go on to college is completely changed. The landscape of that has changed. So how do you, curriculum-wise, decide? I mean, you mentioned a robotics group, right? Okay, 10, 15 years ago, there was no robotics. So how do you adjust to the landscape of what these kids are going to be looking at in 5, 10, 15 years? Because what you do now matters.
It's so hard from a budgetary standpoint because we need that focus on core curriculum, and that is certainly where our kids, that's the function of a public school and with regards to education, but it's also the function of a public school to kind of expose our kids to some opportunities that they might not get at home and things like that. So I think we're working hard internally from what I've seen to create some of these other opportunities. And, I hear about things going on at high school and whatnot. It would be great if we could start at lower levels too, to give kids the opportunity to take some classes or have some programs that are a little outside the box for them. And I think, with regards to budgetary constraints, that's where it comes down to these thoughtful processes where we say we need to ensure that we're meeting kids where they're at and that we're there's like differentiated learning opportunities for everyone, because not everyone is on this linear path. And so it's not like you can look at every student and say, okay, so what are you interested in? And we'll work on that. But I think that it's important to find these sort of, buckets of like areas or programs where we can bring some opportunities into kids. And again, that goes back to the resources you mentioned. We have so many in the community, and I think that that's where, if anything came out of the last year, it was that parent engagement matters, and it matters a lot, and community engagement matters, and that if you have those opportunities to bring things to the schools to help, by all means, please speak up, because I think the schools get a lot of complaints often, and they don't always hear good things, but there are so many good things to be brought out about what our schools are already doing and what they could be doing.
Right.
And I think that that's one way to do it, is to utilize community resources that might not cost anything, like you mentioned previously.
Exactly. Okay, great. In our last about 4 minutes, is there anything that we didn't discuss that you want to bring up?
Not so much that we didn't discuss, but I do think that, part of the reason I wanted to be in school committee is to look at our engagement. And we talked a lot about communication, but I just think that we have so much room for opportunity to make our district healthier and stronger. And I really believe that if we can empower our educators to feel like they can do their primary job again, that's my personal opinion, but we've, as a country as a whole and everything, I think that education is in this like really interesting spot right now. And I'm a really strong believer in public schools. I think that they can do so much for our kids, and that there's so many opportunities there. And so I want to get back to sort of having this, I said it earlier, like a we relationship instead of this us versus them. And I don't want it to be that teachers are bogged down with doing so many other things that they can't do their jobs, basically.
Okay. So in the last couple of minutes, why don't you just look at that camera and tell people why you're running and a little bit about your background.
Sure. My family and I moved to Duxbury almost 9 years ago. We had one child. We now have 3 in the Duxbury public school systems. I grew up out in Colorado. I have a master's degree in education and am actually currently working towards an accelerated degree in nursing. So basically everything I've ever done from an education standpoint was to help others and to give back to the community. I grew up with parents who were really involved in my schools and in my education, and I promised myself that when I had kids, I would do the same thing. So that is what I've done. I've been the president of the Chandler PTA. I'm currently the treasurer. I was on Chandler School Council and was on the 2019 Strategic Planning Committee. I am running for school committee because I really believe that it's a vital element in our town and in our schools, and that there is so much room for collaboration across the board from educators, administrators, and the community, and that I just want to be part of that process and someone who can hopefully facilitate positive changes and improve everything in our schools from an education and a programming standpoint, and just to make sure that over the next few years we get better and our kids feel really good about saying they go to Duxbury Public Schools.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks Katie for participating in this interview. We wish you the best of luck throughout your campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of this interview, please visit our website, pactv.org/elections, for replay times and online viewing options, including PacTV's on-demand and streaming service, PacTV Prime. And please make your choices heard by voting in the election on Saturday, March 26th. Thank you and good day.